Pokemon Legends Arceus introduces the elemental primordial Hisui region, a mountainous, rugged landscape that is unlike any other region that has appeared in the franchise thus far. Technically, Hisui is merely a older version of what we now know as the Sinnoh region, introduced in Pokemon Diamond and Pearl. Yet in terms of the actual experience the player goes through while venturing through Hisui, it is not really like the Sinnoh region, or really like any other region that the games in this franchise have explored. Fans have wanted Breath of the Wild but Pokemon since Breath of the Wild came out, as they're both Nintendo franchises, and Pokemon, with its emphasis on adventuring throughout a vast, varied, fascinating landscape and collecting these different kinds of Pokemon, does seem like a pretty natural fit for that kind of open world exploration. Whether this game satisfies those who had drifted away from the franchise but only were interested because they heard it could be Breath of the Wild but Pokemon, I don't know. I really do not want to wade into that tendacious debate. What I will say is that these games are unlike any Pokemon games that the franchise has thus far released, and entirely unlike any mainline Pokemon games. The closest comparisons I can think of are the likes of spin-offs like XD, Gale of Darkness, and Pokemon Coliseum. But even those points of comparison don't really convey how vast this world is and how different the game is just to experience than any other game in the franchise. It really creates a new idea of how these games can go about exploration and cultivating a sense of discovery and wonder. It is not just an adventure game in the banal, tedious, habitual way that adventure is so often used to just refer to a genre. It is genuinely a game that creates a sense of journeying, a sense of going off from what is known, what is expected, and seeing all that is unknown and unforeseen. Creates a real rush of exhilaration, as one is constantly surprised and greeted with a sense of novelty and newness, sense of change and transience. It really feels like this world is alive and vibrant in a way that the world in previous Pokemon games really doesn't. Legends Arceus stands out in its ability to cultivate a sense of place, a sense of organic continuity in the landscape as a whole, and a sense of genuine and vital and energetic and palpable interaction between the world of the game and the player. Pokemon games have, of course, always been adventure games of sorts. In Red and Blue, you start off in the bucolic town of Pallet, and from there you travel across mountains and fields and waterways until you collect all 8 badges and finally have the ability to journey up to Indigo Plateau and challenge the Elite Four. Most Pokemon games since then have followed some variation of that formula. To the extent that the different towns and routes and parts of the topography and geography of these regions were united before, they were united by a sense of adventure and wonder and whimsy and the ability to catch all these different kinds of creatures. They were united in a utilitarian sense in that you'd interact with these different places the same way, but they weren't really united in a more environmental sense or more ecological sense. All game areas are designed, but in Legends Arceus, it feels more vibrant. It feels like there is a real cohesion and unity in the world that you explore. One could say that it is not as open world as, say, Breath of the Wild, and that is perhaps true, but it still captures, I believe, what makes Breath of the Wild so special, which is that sense of the environment as storytelling. When I say environment or ecology, I'm not trying to be all super environmentalist. I mean, of course I am an environmentalist. I think you'd have to be a fool not to be these days, but that's not really what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about these limp, cliche, save the earth messages. I'm talking about real contemplations of how a world interacts with its different elements. I believe a game world should feel cohesive. It should feel like these different regions are all a part of a larger landscape. Not just physically, but in terms of the player's experience. An example of this is being able to see a place and go there, instead of knowing that it's just set decoration. And there's a lot of that in this game, Legends Arceus, but it goes deeper than that. The environment is very much an active force to be engaged with. It presents certain challenges and difficulties, and then the player has to adjust to those challenges and difficulties. Not in a way that is very didactic, very puzzle-like, very, you just need to do A, B, and C to proceed, although there is some of that, but more in a way that really emphasizes the relationality between the different elements of the landscape. You have the water, you have the mountains, you have the hills, you have the field, but they all feel like they belong to the same landscape. They're all united, not just in this vague sense of cultivating adventure and wonder, but in a deeper sense of creating a sense of active engagement, a sense of phenomenology in a way. I talked a little bit about phenomenology in my video on why I love the Sinnoh region, but it's basically just a very fancy word to say the actual experience of life, instead of just these abstract, quantitative, statistical numbers and formulas. In these games, there's a real sense of space. You come to the top of a mountain and you feel how different it is from the lowlands below. You feel that sense of calmness and serenity. When you're in a jungle or a forest area, you feel a sense of mystery, a sense of strangeness, a sense of beauty and wonder, but also a sense of unease. And the two are connected. You come out from the forest to the mountain, for instance, and you feel that sense of relief, that sense of catharsis. This is what a good game world should do. Now, there are, of course, parts of other Pokemon games that have stood out. It's not like I want to imply that every single area and town and waterway and route in every Pokemon game before this point was just inane, deadening, soul-draining, brutalist blocks and straight lines with no real sense of adventure or discovery. Even back in the first game, you have the eerie Lavender Town. And in later games, you have places like Four Tree City, which is literally a town built in the treetops. You have Sutopolis, which is so isolated that you have to dive down in order to get to it. and it's completely contained in this old crater. You have places like the Distortion World in Platinum, Dragon Spiral Tower in Black and White, and a whole lot of places in Sun and Moon. Games that I deeply love and think are underrated because of a lot of reasons, but primarily because of how they represent a willingness to incorporate the environment, the actual physical, geographical space that you're adventuring through, into the story and the main narrative. It's not just, oh, you go to this gym, fight these people, and get the badge. It's a little more complicated than that. Every challenge feels different and adapted to the specific conditions and basic world of the little island that you're in. It's really compelling, and I don't want to discount that, but I do believe that Legends Arceus goes beyond it in a lot of ways. There are not just these isolated places that make one stop and merely pursue the game functionally, going and completing all the quest objectives, but really admire the sense of place, not just in a, oh, that's really pretty kind of way, but in a way that really comprehends what this means to you as you're experiencing the world of this game. XD Gale of Darkness did this to some extent. I remember Citadark Isle, the endpoint of Gale of Darkness, which is, of course, this almost over-the-top evil villain lair on an active volcano. That's kind of silly in a lot of ways, but there are moments when the game just kind of asks you as the player to appreciate how bleak and barren and brutal and maddening this landscape is. It wants you to feel all that heat, all that lack of visibility from all the clouds of the volcano. It wants you to actually experience this place instead of just asking you to take its word that, yeah, this place is really scary. Legends Arceus takes all that, but goes much further with it. The entire world feels like it's meant to be experienced. It is a world designed for exploration. It is a world designed for real adventure and mystery and discovery. We talk about open world games in the terms of freedom and liberation and how they allow the player to do whatever they want, and there's a lot to be said for that, but ultimately, games, like any other art form, rely on cultivating a specific environment that the player then engages with and interacts with. Their experience is shaped in a much less obvious way, perhaps, than the experience of someone watching a movie, where they're literally directed by the editing and the cinematography. But it's still a sense of guidance, nonetheless. And Legends Arceus really wants you to explore. The exploration is not merely a means to get stuff. If anything, it's the opposite. The stuff you get is just an excuse to go off exploring and feel that sense of wonder and discovery that the game, like Breath of the Wild before it, clearly prizes very highly. And I appreciate that a lot about Legends Arceus. And I really think it lived up to my expectations. I don't know what this means for the future of the franchise, but I do believe that the focus of these adventure games should be on cultivating that sense of wonder through this environment, through a glittering waterfall placed in midst a cave, or a tree that's looks strange on the top of a mountain. And, of course, there is treasure and things that are useful in game at these places, but the places have value in of themselves as a real spot where the game can cultivate this sense of newness and novelty and really shake the player out of the kind of utilitarian, habitual, oh, I gotta go and collect all these little items and do all these objectives mindset that we too often get dragged into while we're playing these games. So thank you all for watching. If you liked what you saw today, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Donate to my Patreon if you can and you want to see more videos like this. I'm really sorry if this is a little too rambly. It's a hard thing to put concisely without sounding trite. I mean, obviously, adventure games are focused on the experience of the player. I don't think anyone would dispute that, but how are they focused on the experience of the player? How do they cultivate that experience? That's something I'm pretty interested in. Reading Heidegger and getting pretty deep into city planning, bizarrely enough, has given me a lot of thoughts on how experience is cultivated spatially. Anyway, tune in soon for our next analysis. It will be coming soon. Thank you all again. Adios, comrades.